So first off, without spoiling anything, is this movie good? Yes. Flawless? No. But good? Fun? Exciting? Action-packed? Very much so. This movie is almost like the Spider-Man equivalent of Endgame, as it is the culmination of several movies, just like Endgame, as Endgame was the culmination of the previous 10 years of the MCU before it. No Way Home is the culmination of the past 20 years of Spider-Man within all movies. Honestly, it is a love letter to three different eras of Spider-Man. And if you're a Spider-Man fan, if you've been a Spider-Man fan during that time, this is right up your alley. This will be a fun, exciting, and exhilarating time for you. And I feel that from the perspective of even if you didn't really care for a lot of the MCU Spider-Man movies, this will still be pretty good for you. Now, getting into the movie proper, spoilers and everything, I do think it's funny that a lot of the MCU movies and events and stuff like that have kind of been about characters kind of picking up their lives after the blip, and a lot of fallout from their personal lives and becoming a lot more high profile than they used to be, especially for Peter, as his outing comes with an accusation of murder. But I feel like that was the only way to actually give stakes to where his character is going, because, him just being outed would only do so much, because a lot of characters in the MCU have their secret identities out. Shoot, a lot of characters in comic books have their secret identities out in Marvel. But Peter's never really had the kind of protection that he would need to fully get things back in order. And you see a lot of that here within the first section of the movie, I should say, as he gets set upon by a whole bunch of people, some just going after him because he's a hero, others seeing him as a murderer. Of course, he ends up being taken into custody for the murder of Mysterio and amongst a whole host of other things. And so does May, Ned, MJ, all of them. But thankfully, they're gotten out of it by none other than Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox. Oof, loved it. The past week has been great for the Netflix series making a comeback. Charlie Cox is Daredevil in this movie, and major spoiler, Vincent D'Onofrio as the Kingpin coming into Hawkeye. I love that they had all of this drop within the same week. But again, the rumors were already there. Seriously, the Spider-Man leaks were just as bad as Peter Parker's secret identity being put out there. They're everywhere, man. But it was great having Charlie Cox really get his dues. After all this time, he really deserved it. And I say, hey, even if having him here also means that we have to bring in Iron Fist the MCU too, I say so be it. I am fully down for all the clown. Hell, recast him with an actor who's actually willing to do the choreography if you have to. Just do it. Do it! But ultimately, Matt Murdock is able to kind of get them out of the situation, basically saying, nobody really has anything solid on you. At most, you'll probably just be torn apart in the court of public opinion at worst. Although, they do have some stuff on Happy because of all the Stark tech he managed to have squirreled away, so Happy Hogan's in a bit of trouble. But Peter's life is completely turned upside down. They end up moving in with Happy just because their home has been compromised. But as Peter's trying to basically just live his life and get into college, MJ and Ned and he all end up being rejected from all the colleges they try to get into because of their association with Peter. And it makes a certain amount of sense. So Peter, feeling that all of this is his fault, goes to Stephen Strange to have him cast a spell that'll get people to forget that he's Spider-Man. But Peter keeps wanting more and more exceptions to those rules, such as, MJ still knowing, Ned still knowing, Happy, Aunt May, all of that. And that caused his constant wanting of more and more exceptions, especially the last one of everyone who knew before still knowing causes the spell to go haywire, and it sucks in people from all different dimensions who know that Peter is Spider-Man. But Peter doesn't know that at first, as Strange thinks that he's managed to contain the spell well enough at first. He also gets really pissed off at Peter because Peter apparently didn't, try to plead his case to any of the schools he applied to see if he could still get in. But I mean, he's a kid. He wouldn't really know about anything like that. So Peter goes to talk to a member of the school board about Ned and MJ trying to see if they can get in, only for him to be ambushed by Doc Ock, who was plucked straight from the middle of Spider-Man 2, played by the ever amazing Alfred Molina, who does a fantastic job. They have a brief battle. Ock's tentacles absorb some of Peter's nanites from his suit, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know why they did that. I have to assume that was something about the AI in Ock's tentacles just did that. It's kind of strange, but it happens. But because of that, Peter is able to take control of the tentacles through the nanites, almost like using a Bluetooth. It's just like, paired new device. Like, what? I thought that was kind of hilarious to a certain degree. So Ock loses complete control of his tentacles, and he ends up being captured because of that. But they're then ambushed by none other than the Green Goblin, plucked right from the first Spider-Man movie in the early 2000s. And I thought that was pretty cool. But then they're whisked away by Doctor Strange, who had been going toe-to-toe with the Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He informs Peter that, yeah, I contained the spell, but certain people who knew a Peter Parker as Spider-Man identity ended up coming to this world. We gotta capture them, send them all back. He has them imprisoned in a place underneath the Sanctum Sanctorum called the Undercroft, and he's just like, find these villains, capture them, and we will send them all home. So Peter brings in MJ and Ned in on the whole situation, and Peter goes villain hunting, basically. But he also ends up turning his spider suit inside out because it had a whole bunch of paint on it. Yeah, his Iron Spider suit ended up being partially absorbed by Ock, so he couldn't use that one. And the suit that he made at the end of the previous movie got paint on it. So he ends up turning that inside out, which is the weirdest excuse for him to have a new costume. But thanks to a device that Doctor Strange gave him that will transport these guys to the Undercroft, he ends up heading out to a location where he thinks he'll find the Green Goblin, but he comes upon Electro, who's reforming himself. And Peter has a bit of trouble with him until dealing with Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then Sandman from Spider-Man 3 shows up trying to help Peter out, thinking that it was his Peter. But they end up dealing with Electro, sending him to the Undercroft. Sandman gets a little spooked. It's just like, what did you do to him? Did you kill him? Peter sends him to the Undercroft too. Peter is also contacted by Aunt May because Norman Osborn showed up at Feast, which I love the fact that Feast has become Aunt May's thing. Ever since that was introduced in the comics, I think it was 15 years ago or so, it's just become this reoccurring thing for her, whereas Aunt May had the tendency not to really do anything in most Spider-Man lore, and making her a kind of a charity person, that was a great addition to her character. But Norman's mind is fractured, and I love the way that William Dafoe he plays Norman like he never left the role. It's just fantastic. And Norman's mind is fractured. He knows that he's done terrible things as a goblin and he wants help. And while Peter just wants to take the guy and send him back to his universe, May sees a man who is in need of help and begs Peter to do something for him before they just send him back. He's a broken man who actually needs help. They all might be, to all the villains that he's captured, and there is some truth to that. A lot of them didn't start off wanting to be what they were. I mean, Flint Marco, he didn't want to become the Sandman. It would happen by accident. Max Dillon, he never wanted to become Electro. Again, it happened by accident. Norman Osborn brought the whole goblin situation on himself, but that came from a place of desperation and it got out of hand. Same thing with Octavius. He lost control of his arms because of an experiment. Connors, he just wanted his arm back. He was never really a terrible and intimidating person. And I think it's actually pretty nice that this movie acknowledged that these people were all just broken men who felt like they'd been slighted in their life. And when Peter finds out that a lot of them, because some of them come from the same universe, find out a lot of them are fated to die. Goblin finds out that he was fated to die from Doc Ock. Sandman informs Ock that he ended up dying. Electro realizes that he was about to die at the end of Spider-Man 2 when he kind of dissipated. And even Lizard's just like, did I die? And I mean, hell, it's a good question at the end of things. No, he doesn't die, but I'd be worried about that too. So Peter starts to kind of rethink sending them just right on back to their universe as Strange comes in with this device that'll just instantly send back anybody who had, slipped into their universe. So Peter's just like, no, I want to try to help these people. He ends up getting into a fight with Doctor Strange. It's an amazing battle, a visual feast for the eyes between Spidey's web slinging and Strange's magic and dimension crossing and all that. It is absolutely fabulous. And I love the fact that the way that Spidey ends up getting the upper hand on Strange is through just an understanding of geometry in the mirror dimension. And Strange ends up bound. He's eventually going to get out of the trap that Spidey set for him, but Spidey hopes that that's enough time for him to just basically fix all these villains for the most part. And of course, a few of them are a bit reluctant, but I mean, it beats dying, so he, in a hilarious moment, brings all of them back to Happy's apartment. We get all these great scenes. I loved the scenes of a lot of the villains just talking, because you don't get enough of that. That was always the biggest problem with the fact that so many villains end up dying in a lot of these Marvel movies, is that you don't get any villain team up. And one of the best things about Spidey was he was one of the first heroes to have all of his villains team up in a significant way. And villain team ups are always the best thing. Like the Fearsome Four versus the Fantastic Four, or the Masters of Evil versus the Avengers, the Legion of Doom or the Secret Society of Supervillains versus the Justice League. Villains coming together is always a fascinating situation because they're all these big egos all in one place. And Peter and Aunt May are doing their best in order to heal these people. They're getting some help from Norman Osborn, who's still in his good persona. They come up with a fix for Octavius's fried chip for his tentacles, and he manages to get fixed up. They silence the voices of the tentacles trying to control him. That's a very touching moment. They figure out a way to completely siphon off Max Dillon's energy so that he can go back to being a normal person. They come up for a cure for the Green Goblin serum, but unfortunately, over the course of things, the Goblin rears his ugly head within Norman because he doesn't want to be cured. He doesn't want to just go away. And so he goes on the offensive. He gives this speech about, this power doesn't make us lesser than, it makes us gods. We should be in control of things. That sways Max Dillon, who just wants to continue being Electro. Doc Ock is trying his best to help out, and he ends up fighting Electro to a little bit Flint Margot just wants out of there. He just wants home to go see his daughter. Lizard escapes, and all of this happens when J. Jonah Jameson manages to track down where Peter is at. And so he records all these villains escaping. This awesome battle ensues with Peter going at it against Norman and just crashing through these walls and through the floors, this, that, and the other. May grabs all the various antidotes in order to try to get them to safety. And as Norman's battle against Peter rages on, May tries to go in and use the cure on him. It doesn't work for some reason. I thought that was weird because there's never an explanation as to why it didn't work. Maybe they just ran out of time or Norman tampered with it. But Norman is determined to make Spider-Man into this ruthless killer. Just like in the first Spider-Man. He wanted Peter to join him, to become just like him, if nothing else. So he brings in his glider to, take out Aunt May in order to prove to Peter, or just, incentivize Peter to become a darker version of himself as Norman escapes. And at first it seems like May is okay, which is a very fascinating kind of situation that is an actual thing where you have Walking Dead syndrome, where you don't realize you've been fatally injured until you just lose all of your energy. As where at first when May thinks that she's okay and Peter thinks that she's okay, she's just like, this wasn't on you. It wasn't wrong that we tried to help these people. They were going to die. It was the right thing to do. She delivers the "with great power comes great responsibility" line. So I guess Uncle Ben never taught him that, which I'm really wondering. They really did make Uncle Ben's death in this universe kind of inconsequential to a certain degree. But after May tries to get Peter to go out and get these guys and cure them, she ends up slowly dying in his arms in this really tragic scene. Like, God, it really sucked because not too long ago, if you played the Spider-Man PS4 game, Aunt May died there too, and it was really tragically sad and depressing, and just seeing Aunt May die again, which is also kind of funny to me because in the comics the woman just won't stay dead, and now within the past few years I've seen Aunt May die twice. It is some wild shit, but man, Marissa Tomei, oof, that death scene was damn near worthy of an Oscar, which, I mean, she is an Oscar-winning actor, I believe, so it makes a lot of sense. But Peter is destroyed. MJ and Ned are at a loss for what to do because they received the box from Peter to press it should things go south, but they wanted to hear from Peter before they did anything. Ned had managed to get Doctor Strange's sling ring from Peter, who took it from him during their battle, so he'd have a harder time of getting back to New York. And Ned had made this previous comment that magic ran in his family, which I think is funny because it gives Ned a little bit more to do in this movie, which I'm all for, if nothing else. But because Ned has the sling ring, he ends up opening portals wanting to see Peter Parker, only for him to open a portal and it's the wrong Peter Parker. It ends up being Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, and oh man, the people in my theater went mad with applause when he showed up. They were so excited. They loved it. They ate it up. It was really just fun seeing him in the suit again and trying to prove to MJ and Ned that he was Peter Parker. And then they decide, okay, we'll just keep opening portals till they find their Peter Parker. Ned opens up another portal. Bam, it's Tobey Maguire. The crowd goes wild again. Honestly, Andrew and Tobey got the same level of applause in my theater, which I thought was pretty wild. I love that people love those characters so much and we're happy to see them come back. But they have some cute moments together. They help MJ and Ned find where Peter is. They comfort Peter over the loss of May. Peter is introduced to his otherworldly counterparts, and they have this beautiful discussion about law. I mean, my God, the moments between the three of them when they first meet is fantastic, because it's just like, honestly, Tom Holland's Peter has felt weirdly off ever since he was introduced, just because of his relationship with like Tony Stark and all that. That really kind of threw me. And this was the first movie where it wasn't just Peter being a protege of Tony, it was Peter trying to be his own person, make his own decisions and all this. And in that moment, he felt the most Peter Parker he ever did because of his loss. And, Toby's Peter talking about the loss of his Uncle Ben and how he hunted down the killer and got revenge and it didn't really give him satisfaction. And Andrew Garfield's Peter talking about the loss of his Gwen as well as his Uncle Ben and how that destroyed him and it sent him down a dark path. I love that they were just trying to talk Peter out of going down a darker road, because, being this darker version of yourself, it doesn't lead to any happiness. It doesn't bring anyone back. It just makes you feel even worse than you already do now. So they try to steer him away from the path of vengeance. Peter agrees to make cures for basically everyone, although it's obvious he's hesitant to cure Norm. Like, he does still want that vengeance, and you can see it in his eyes. But they all work together, concocting cures, talking back and forth about their various differences. And I love the moment where, Toby's Peter shows off that he has organic webs, and, Andrew and Toby talking about the fact that their love lives have been very tumultuous, and, Ned even asking Toby's Peter, hey, do you have a best friend? And he goes on the whole tirade about what happened with Harry, and it's ironic because Ned in another universe becomes the Hobgoblin, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. But they manage to whip up the cures, and Peter decides that they'll have their showdown at a remote place where the least amount of people will get injured, and it's a very public place that is easy to find, and that's at the Statue of Liberty that's being, weirdly enough, renovated to have a Captain America shield in his hand, which is just gaudy as all get out, and I'm glad it eventually ends up getting torn off over the course of the battle, because it's just like, no, never do that. That's a terrible idea. But Peter puts out a broadcast to J. Jonah Jameson, telling all the villains where to come and find him. A little bit more banter with the three Peters, which again is just a fun little moment. But this is interrupted by Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard showing up. They battle with them a little bit, but they're uncoordinated because they're not used to working in teams. Well, at least two of them aren't. MCU Peter, Tom Holland Peter, he's a little bit more used to working with other people. And I thought that was great. A great reasoning behind why Tom Holland's Peter is a little bit more fit to coordinate the two other Peters, because they never really did have to work in a team. So they start coordinating a little better, deciding that they'll deal with one villain at a time. They take on the Sandman first, which is a great scene with the Sandman going after Toby's Peter. And then they try to deal with Electro, but he's really tough to deal with right up until Doc Ock shows up and lends a helping hand, which I thought was a great moment for Doc Ock to just have that another moment to really show that deep down he is a good person. Although he makes a great villain too, so take your ups and your downs with that kind of situation. And then they cure the Lizard last, right as Doctor Strange shows up, and he's ready to just send them all back, but then he sees that Peter's plan to rehabilitate them is working. Also, there's this fantastic discussion which really got my crowd in an uproar, where Electro is talking with Andrew Garfield's Peter about how he thought that Andrew Garfield's Peter was a black Spider-Man because of the way that he just carried himself, and how he was disappointed that he wasn't black, and everybody ate that up in my theater. Just like the whole team up of the three Spider-Man got my theater hype. That one scene where the three of them just land, and it's just like I mean, it was just like, man, that would make amazing wallpaper. But they managed to deal with all of those villains, and then the Green Goblin shows up, manages to destroy the box device to send everyone back home. It unleashes pandemonium as all these rifts start to open through dimensions, as Toby's Peter grapples with the Green Goblin, and they get into this knockdown, drag out fight, and Peter's just ready to kill the Goblin, just end him right then and there, only to be stopped by Toby's Peter, who, he's trying to steer Tom Holland's Peter away from that, because it's just like, it doesn't do anything for you, man. You do this, you don't gain anything by it. I love that look, and he doesn't say anything. He just gives Tom Holland's Peter this look, and fantastic. And then Tobey Maguire's Peter gets stabbed by Norman, but Peter still decides to cure Norman and be done with it. Tobey's Peter manages to survive, but all these rifts are opening up because everyone who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man are coming after this Spider-Man, so Peter decides to make the ultimate sacrifice because Peter can never have nice things ever, and just have everyone forget who Peter Parker is, specifically this Peter Parker, which, Strange is just like, that's a hell of a sacrifice because nobody will remember you. It's like you never existed. Everything you've done, everything you've been through, it'll be like it never happened, which is, God, that takes the consequence of the way Peter did things in the comics to the next level. Seriously. Just, oof. And so Strange does it. He casts the spell. Peter says goodbye to the other Peters and MJ and Ned, and they have this heartfelt goodbye. And then we hit Christmas, which I think is ironic because it's just like, I would love it if all this was happening. The last scene here during Christmas time was happening right around the same time as the Hawkeye series, as Peter attempts to go and talk to MJ and Ned to get them to remember to some degree. He ultimately decides against it, not wanting to bring them into his struggles and his life and his problems and all that, which is such a Peter Parker thing to do. And, you leave things off with him, with Peter being in this apartment, which is very reminiscent of Peter's apartment in the Spider-Man 2 movie and Spider-Man 3. And he makes this homemade Spider-Man suit with the classic red and blue, and then you see him head out into the fray, thus ending Peter's home series storyline. But then you get the after credits scene, which is Eddie Brock at a bar getting the lowdown on all these various different otherworldly people, only to immediately be sent back to his universe, but leaves behind a small bit of venom. And oh man, what a troll. What a troll. So many people were just like, oh my god, Venom's gonna be in the Spider-Man movie. It's like, yeah, but not in the capacity that you thought he would. Which isn't terrible. Would have been great to see them really play off of each other, but this is fine too. You still have the potential for a Venom in the MCU. And then the next end credits scene is basically just a trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. You see him team up with Wanda. You see a little bit of America Chavez, but she doesn't open up any of her signature portals. You see a little bit of Baron Mordo, a little bit of Shumagorath, or a creature who looks like Shumagorath. And you also find out, I guess, the enemy of the movie is an evil Doctor Strange, which very much is like, okay, does that mean the what if story is coming into the live action? Is that what we're kind of leading into? I wonder. But it is, if that's the case, it is again great to have everything start to really tie into each other. Although I think it's kind of weird because with all of Peter's history in high school basically being erased, because he even has to, get his GED now, because he doesn't have a high school diploma or anything. We're going to get an animated series about I think it was MCU Peter's life in high school, which I'm just like, but that's been erased though. Why are we getting that? Unless the series is going in another direction altogether, but just like that raises so many questions. But yeah, it was a great movie, great acting, great moments. The villains playing off of each other was fun and funny and fantastic. They're like Toby, Andrew, Jamie Foxx, just all of them. Their acting was just on point. The effects were pretty fun, a little wonky in some places, especially when Peter ended up grappling with Strange's cloak. That was the scene needed a little bit more work, but it was still a fun scene and just it was a fun time. You know, this is so close to a Sinister Six movie, but no cigar, and that's unfortunate. But you got pretty close. You know, one off from a full-on Sinister Six. Although you could say there was fully six because Peter was still reeling from Mysterio's actions, so it's just like, I mean, hey, six people managed to menace Peter's life within the span of a few weeks to a month, so I guess that counts for something. But this was a fun movie. This was a great movie. I highly recommend it. See it with an audience because an audience will go wild at the most fun parts and really get you hyped up. And again, great movie, a great send off to all the other Spider-Man movies, a great kind of sense of closure to some degree. Didn't even talk about the scene where Andrew Garfield's Peter saves MJ from falling to her death, and that's a bit of a moment for him, and just, y'all did good by these characters. This was a great, fun Spider-Man movie. Not as good as Into the Spider-Verse, but Into the Spider-Verse is his own animal. This one was trying to build upon a couple of decades worth of lore, whereas Into the Spider-Verse was just like trying to just do its own thing. So take of that what you will. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. You know, did you watch the movie? What did you think? I hope you did. It deserves your time and effort and money, which I don't think that'll be a problem with the packed theater I ended up in. So again, let me know your thoughts and feelings. And if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, bell, all that YouTube stuff. Or don't. I ain't your daddy, but I still love you like one. Until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye.